Hey, welcome to the channel. Today we're going to be taking a look at a on-camera monitor. It's the Atomos Shinobi. It's not a new monitor, but it is the one that I have, so that's what we're going to look at today. So a couple weeks ago I made a video about consolidating and just sort of focusing my camera equipment and gear and just sort of like getting rid of the stuff that didn't make a whole lot of sense to me anymore. And part of that consolidation was getting rid of my Atomos Shogun Inferno, which is a bigger 7-inch monitor slash recorder, and it has a lot of like more pro level features on it, mostly having to do with connectivity. It has a bunch of SDI in and SDI out connections, and I don't have a camera that has SDI anymore, so yeah, it didn't really make a whole lot of sense, and I didn't really find myself using the recording features all that much. So yeah, I just kind of made the decision that I didn't really need that level of monitor slash recorder anymore. So I sold it, but I still do find having an on-camera monitor display is pretty helpful. So the Shinobi is just a monitor, so no recording features. It came out sometime in 2019, I believe, after the, I guess it was the Ninja V or the Ninja 5 came out. So the same kind of form factor, but just having the record features stripped away. As such, it's a much lighter and quieter monitor, not having the internal processing to do all the recording. It gets warm, but it doesn't get as hot as the Shogun Inferno did, because it's just not doing as much as a recorder does. Another positive to not having the record function is that it doesn't quite chew through batteries to the same extent, although given that it's a really bright display, it does, it does go through batteries. I have a couple of Sony NP style, so I've got a small one here that I haven't done like an actual battery usage length test, but I would say that even the small one will last you a good hour, an hour plus. I've got these bigger style, so this is a 53.28 watt-hour battery, and these will definitely last you a good 4 or 5 hours, depending on the brightness setting. So this is a maximum 1000 nit brightness monitor, which there are brighter monitors out there nowadays, but still 1000 nits is really bright. It's pretty viewable in bright sunlight. Once again, there are brighter monitors, but it's definitely going to be brighter than, son of a bitch. Don't step on my camera. It's definitely going to be brighter than your built-in LCD on your camera. So I'd say 1000 nits, still pretty good, and it's a good compromise between, maximum brightness, but also pretty decent battery life. So there are two versions of this. So this is the HDMI version, which had a price drop, and it's now $299. And then there is a newer version which has a 3G SDI. So it has a 1.5 and 3G SDI in and 3G SDI out, and that version is $399. And it also has an HDMI in. So if you feel like you want to future-proof just a little bit more, you can spend an extra $100 and get the SDI version. So Atomos does advertise this as being a 10-bit HDR ready display. Now I do believe it's an 8-bit display plus like the extra 2 bits in sort of like what's called FRC, and without getting into the details of it because I don't know it and I don't want to just sit here and read off something from the internet. You can monitor in 10-bit, you can monitor in HDR and see all of that dynamic range. So for all intents and purposes, I would say it's an HDR ready monitor. It has pretty much every pro level monitoring and in terms of exposure and color that you could want. There's really nothing missing from this. So you've got histogram, you've got waveforms, a vector scope, and you have false color. So waveform, vector scope, histogram, false color. I think that's pretty much everything that exists out there in terms of monitoring exposure and color. In addition to all the exposure and color monitoring, you do have zebras, and you can change the threshold of the zebras from all the way up to 105% down to 50%. It has focus peaking. One thing I don't like about this monitor is I'm not a huge fan of the UI. I feel like the older software was a little bit easier to use. I always feel like I'm hitting buttons that I don't want to hit, which is annoying. So with the focus peaking, you can change the type of focus peaking. You've got different options for that, and you can change the color of the focus peaking as well. Another really great feature of this one is you can load in custom LUTs to display. So it's easy. All you have to do is, why don't you go do something with your life? So all you have to do is load up the LUTs in the .cube format onto an SD card and insert the SD card into the monitor, and then you can import them there and it'll store them on the hard drive. And there is, you can store up to 8 LUTs on here. In addition to that, you have the ability to punch in order to check focus. You've got a 2x magnification and a 4x magnification. And then you can move around the screen by just dragging with your thumb. So that's super helpful for checking your critical focus. And one other really awesome feature, and this is kind of what the main impetus for making this video, is the different aspect ratio guidelines that are available. And I'm not saying that all of these aren't available on some of the competitive monitors out there. There's a couple that I find to be particularly helpful in this day and age for some of the work that you might be doing. So one reason that you might opt for a cheaper monitor like this that's basically HDMI only, and it doesn't even have an HDMI out. So really you can't pass the HDMI signal from the camera to the monitor and then out to another device, which is another feature that you probably get, or you will get with more expensive monitors. But I feel like this is marketed and made for people who are doing, you know, YouTube, obviously, and then other social media type work where a small DSLR or mirrorless camera is really all you need, but still being able to do, you still want to do high quality work. Obviously having a bigger, sharper display, it's brighter and easier to see is helpful, but having these frame guides is another thing that's super helpful when we're doing stuff for social media. And then you've got 1:1, so and essentially you've got a square aspect ratio, and then 5:4, and then you even have a 1:1.9, which is essentially like your vertical video. I recently have been working with a client. She's an interior designer and she's trying to step up her Instagram and do a lot of video content. So I'm shooting videos for her in square format because they're going like right to her Instagram feed, and the ability to just frame out your shot in the correct aspect ratio, not really having to guess or even like tape off the monitor, which I've seen people do. So I just wanted to mention that as like a really nice selling feature for this monitor. One other thing that was kind of a pain was updating the firmware. If you go to like the Atomos support page and try to figure out how you're supposed to update the firmware, it says that the Shinobi will not update firmware unless the SD card is MS-DOS formatted, where I don't know if that's because they're Australian and like MS-DOS is like somehow conflated with FAT32, but what they mean by MS-DOS is FAT32. And I don't know why they just don't say FAT32, because MS-DOS is an old text-based operating system from the 80s and mid-90s that's been obsolete since the advent of Windows. So that was a bit confusing for me, and somehow, I kept digging and digging and realized that MS-DOS meant FAT32. So when you go to format your memory card, your SD card, you will get the option to format it either in exFAT or FAT32, and you want FAT32. So if that saves you a little bit of trouble, you're welcome. And if you knew that already, then, and I'm an idiot, then whatever. You also notice that there is no DC input for power, and that's because the only other thing you get with the package is a dummy battery, so a dummy NP style battery to wall outlet, and they have various plugs for different parts of the world. So if you want to run this on the DC power in your area, you have to use this dummy battery. I know that the higher end Atomos recorders typically have a DC, like a 12 volt in, so you can run it from the wall, but also have batteries installed and they will charge while it is being run on wall power. So that's a good feature that is absent from this. And another good thing, like if you were ever wanting to run on like a V-mount or like a gold mount battery, you would have to get like a D-tap to NP style dummy battery in addition to this in order to power it on a battery. Thanks for watching this video. I hope it was somewhat helpful. And if you've got any questions, obviously leave them in the comments and I will get back to you. And thanks for watching, and see you in another video.